All right, so let's talk about the importance of building and designing a successful mobile app, okay? Because there's quite a big difference between just being able to build a mobile app and being able to build a successful mobile app, okay? They say something like 99.5% of the mobile apps that are built are not successful. And that's because most people just focus on just the building of the mobile app aspect of things. And they believe that if they build something that they find interesting and they put it on the app market, users will somehow just find it and it'll be a successful app. But that's far from reality, okay? There are some critical things to take into consideration when you're developing your mobile app in order to ensure that it becomes successful. And I wish when I first started mobile app development, someone shared these secrets with me. And it took me a while to make some of these realizations or to find out about some of the things that I'm about to talk to you about. So if you're serious about developing a successful mobile app business, or you simply don't want to be part of that 99.5% of app developers that fail, and you want to improve your chances of success to 99%, then try to pay close attention to some of the things I'm about to discuss. The first big thing that is critical to your app success is identifying who your target audience is, or the main purpose of your app. A lot of people just build apps based on what their interest is, and they just assume that everyone else in the world has the same need or has the same interest. First, try to identify the purpose of your app. You should be able to, in one sentence, describe what your app does or what it's intended for. So there's several different niches or categories. It could be an education app. It could be just some casual gaming app. It could be a productivity app. The list is endless, okay? Once you identify the purpose of your app, you can identify who the target audience is. So every new feature that you develop in your app should keep that target audience in mind. So for example, if your app is intended to be just a casual gaming app, you can't all of a sudden start having tutorials in your app about how to operate some camera gear or things that are irrelevant to who your target audience is. So you have to be clear on what the purpose of the app is and the specific target audience that you're trying to reach. One other thing I want to mention on this topic is that try your best to also figure out if the target audience that you're trying to reach wants your app. So in order to do this, you can just build the minimum viable product, which basically means the core functionality of your app. Just forget about all of those extra features that your app has to provide. But the core functionality of your app, you can build that out first. And then before you release it to the public, you can release it to some testers. Android and Apple, they make this very easy for you. You can have your app released to beta testers instead of the public, and you can get feedback from those beta testers. If you're receiving some reviews from your beta testers that are saying, oh, this is such a great app, or I can't wait till the official version gets released, those are all positive things that indicate that you have a good app idea. However, if you notice that your app gets downloaded and then uninstalled on the same day, and you're either not getting any type of feedback from your users, or you're getting negative feedback from those beta testing users, then it's probably time to switch that idea up. And the earlier you switch up your idea, the better, because you don't want to put a lot of time and investment into developing a product that no one really cares to use. So to give you an example, Instagram actually didn't start as this social media app that is centered around photos, okay? Initially, their idea was more so the location of the photos that you took. So all of these filters for photos and sharing and liking and all of these other things that you see on Instagram nowadays was actually a change of direction from their initial idea. Because when they put out their initial idea, they realized that they didn't really have a good audience for that initial idea. So when they changed their idea and their target audience, that's when they started to get the traction that made them what they are today. Okay, so after identifying the target audience and the purpose of your app, the next thing you should do is focus on the user experience design, okay? A lot of apps that tend to fail usually overcomplicate things, and they make the user experience so frustrating that people just tend to uninstall their app and rather install another app that has a much more pleasant user experience. And by user experience, I'm not talking about you having to do anything extravagant or having the best design in the world. But as long as your design or your app design is attractive and also it's not complicated, and by not complicated, I mean if the person sees a specific button or clickable item in your app, they intuitively know exactly what will happen when they click that item. And for every type of action that the user tries to perform in your app, there should be a very simple process to perform that action. My rule of thumb is it shouldn't take more than 3 different clicks for a user to perform any type of action that they want to perform within your app. And in terms of making your design look beautiful, you can always take inspiration from other apps that you admire that look beautiful to you. So even nowadays, with the help of AI, you can create some very visually impressive content for your app. So you have no excuse to make your app look beautiful. Even if you don't want to think about the visual design part of your app and you want to focus just on the coding aspect, there are a lot of freelancers out there that are willing to make your design look as beautiful as possible. So like I said, try to make the user experience as pleasant as possible, and that would promote engagement within your app. Okay, so the next big thing that I wanted to talk about is the performance and responsiveness of your app. A very long time ago, users would be willing to wait more than 30 seconds for some app content to load, and people were generally more patient. But nowadays, if you click a button and within 3 seconds you don't see any type of action in the app, whether it's a loading screen or some type of animation to show that something is loading, the user is just going to assume that your app has crashed. And speaking of app crashing, try to limit the amount of bugs that your app is producing. I mean, when you first start out, it's inevitable that you probably release some version of your app that has some bugs in it. And if the users really love your app or your app idea, you're willing to forgive 1 or 2 bugs here and there. But the more bugs your app has or the more times your app crashes, the more users will be uninstalling your app. And nowadays, there are several ways to ensure that your app has no bugs. So what I personally use is a service or a platform called Fiverr. You can essentially give your app to a bunch of different testers, and they'll go through almost all the features of your app to ensure that there's no bugs. And if they identify the bug, they'll let you know exactly where your app has crashed or places that you can improve on in order to have a better user experience. And specifically on Fiverr, it really doesn't cost much to have someone test your app. So instead of spending a lot of your own time trying to go through each and every feature of your app, trying to test each and every functionality to see if there's a bug, you can always have someone else do it. And most likely, things that you didn't even think of to test, someone else would probably test better than you would. So I recommend that you make your app as bug-free as possible, and also try to ensure that your app is as fast and as responsive as possible. So the next big thing to take into consideration when designing a successful mobile app is security and privacy. So if you're developing an app that collects users' data, I think it goes without saying, I don't really need to mention this, but only use your users' data for what it was originally intended to be used for. So on the app stores, when you upload your app, it usually would ask you if you're collecting users' data and what you're using that data for, because your users need to be fully aware of what is happening with your data. So if you're saying you're going to do one thing with your data and you end up doing something else, like selling your data to some other company just to make a profit, then you're opening yourself up for a lot of troubles or legal troubles. And also, one other thing to do with security is that if you are using a third party to store your app data, okay? Because as a new developer, most likely if you're collecting user data, you're going to be storing it on some type of hosting service. If at any point you need to use another service or send your user's data to another third-party service or company, just make sure that you do your due diligence. Make sure that that company is not some shady company, and make sure that the user is fully aware of how their data is being handled. This is all information that you can put inside your privacy policy, just to make sure that you yourself as a developer have some legal protection. So another big thing that you need to think about, especially if you're trying to develop a profitable app, is your monetization strategy. And by this, I mean the way you're going to be making money from your app. There's several different types of monetization strategies, but the most popular ones are either having some type of in-app purchase where the users can purchase some contents directly in your app. There's a subscription model where the users paying you on a regular reoccurring basis. You can have in-app ads, which is probably the most common one, where the users use your app for free, but you're making money through the ads that the user is viewing. And there's so many different types of monetization strategies. But what I'm saying here is to be clear with what types of monetization strategies you want to implement in your app. Because depending on the type of target audience you have, your monetization strategy might be very different. So for example, if you have an app where your target audience is business users, those users are more likely to be paying for things on a subscription basis than other types of users. And also, if you have a casual gaming app, the users are more tolerant for having constant ads than other types of users. So depending on what type of target audience you have or what the purpose of your app is, you may have different approaches to your monetization strategy. So try to be clear on how your app is going to be making money or what your monetization strategy is going to be. So another big one that people tend to overlook is App Store optimization or your ASO. So what I mean by App Store optimization is the contents that you put in the App Store that describes your app to users that are looking for an app to download. You should try to optimize it as much as possible to get the most downloads possible, okay? So it could be something like your title, for instance. You'll notice that nowadays, a lot of the app titles may have not only the company name, but also a little bit about what the app does. Another trend that you'll probably start noticing is the fact that the screenshots for the apps are not just raw screenshots that only show the screen of the app, but it may have just a little phrase or sentence on each screenshot to provide more information about what the app is supposed to do or the purpose of the app. So if you're using screenshots that are not self-explanatory, try to also put a little bit of a description on your screenshots. And another one to think about is your app description. Okay, so this is not the title of the app, but the long form description of your app. Try to keep some keywords in there that you know people are probably going to be searching for. So when you're writing the description of your app, also keep in mind what the user might be typing into the App Store search bar and try to put a few of those keywords somewhere in your description. And that's a very simplified piece of advice for App Store optimization, but there's a lot more you can do in order to improve the chances that your app is going to be one of the first few apps that are displayed when a user is searching for an app to download. Okay, so now let's talk about the next big thing, which is promotion and marketing. So one of the big reasons why 99% of developers fail is because they have no marketing or promotion strategies, okay? They just believe that if you build the app and you put it on the store, someone is just eventually going to find it, and that's how they're going to get their downloads. But the reality is that you could have the best designed app that solves the user's needs, but if the user doesn't know the app exists, then you're basically not going to get any downloads. And there's a lot of different strategies to use when you're marketing, and not all of them have to involve money, okay? You can market your app for free by using your social media, or you can do paid marketing, which is essentially creating ads to bring in users. So marketing as a whole is a very big topic that we can get into, but for the sake of keeping this video short, I'm going to give you 3 different things you can try, which is either social media marketing, influencer marketing, or collaborating with another well-known app, or trying to get your app on some app review websites. Or if you have some money, you can always do some paid marketing as well. Okay, so now let's talk about another big thing to take into consideration, which is measuring and analytics, okay? So as you get more users using your app, it's important to try to get some feedback from those users, okay? So even within your app, you can have a message section where users can provide their feedback, and based on the feedback that your users give you, you can make improvements on your app, okay? And keep in mind that you don't only need to collect feedback within your app, but you'll also notice that when users leave reviews for your app, typically it also has information about what the users love about your app or what they don't like about your app inside the reviews that the users leave. So constantly try to monitor your reviews to see where your app can improve and take action on making those improvements as quickly as possible. So another thing to talk about in regards to analytics is that for every app that you release to the app market, the App Store shows you some basic analytics regarding your app, whether it's the demographic of your app, could be the gender, the age, the location, of your app users, how long the users spend in your app, how many users come back after one day or after a week. There's so many different analytics. And my advice to you is try to pay close attention to this type of data because it keeps you well informed of how your app is doing and also who your actual target audience is. And in some cases, it gives you ideas of things you can do to improve your app. So the last big thing I wanted to talk about is the post-launch support and updates. A lot of the 99% of developers that are not successful have the misconception that once I build my app, I don't really need to do much else. All the hard work is done. I've built the app and I've put it onto the market. But like I mentioned before, you always have to constantly try to be improving your app based on your users' feedback. Okay, so that could mean that instead of updating your app once every year or so, you're actually updating your app much more frequently, either to test out some new features, to solve some bugs that some users have reported, or to improve your app based on some suggestions that your users have provided. And it's usually the developers that are constantly trying to update and improve their app that are usually the most successful. So these are the key main points that I believe differentiates the 99% of app developers that fail from the app developers that are successful. And just to recap, these things are first identifying your target audience and the purpose of your app. The next is to create a great user experience or user interface design. Another one is to focus on your app's performance and responsiveness. Also, address any security and privacy issues that you may encounter. Next would be to determine what your monetization strategy is going to be. Also, try to put some time into App Store optimization. Think about how you're going to promote or market your app. Keep measuring some of your key performance indicators to get better insight to how your app is performing. And finally, continue updating your app so that you can stay ahead of the competition. So if you keep these things in mind and you take action on these things, there's a very, very good chance that whatever app you're building is going to be a successful app.